All right. Looks like we're good to go. Hopefully everybody can see my screen and hear me. Got Revit open. Sitting at my desk. I figured since today was just a design day anyways, I'm gonna be sitting at the computer working on something. Just figured I'd go ahead and go live and let everybody join in and see if anybody wants to give any comments or just see what a day in the life would be like. So a little bit of background on this project. This is for my company. We were hired a while ago to design this salon. It's what we call a tenant finish out. So essentially, they are going into like a shell retail building that you probably have seen before. I think next to this is like Target and TJ Maxx, that kind of stuff. Anyways, my client, she's leasing out about, let's see, about 2,000 square feet of space within this development. So we've been working on this for a bit. We've gone through a few different iterations of spaces and layouts, things like that. So that's what I'm working on today. We kind of are getting close to the actual layout that she's going to want to go with, but we have a few changes we need to make before we get started, just to clear everything up. I work in Autodesk Revit. We're going to be doing some renderings out of Enscape. This is all the professional software that we use in the architecture community here in the U.S. and it's what we use in our office. We've been doing this for I've been doing this for 24 years now, and majority of it in Revit. Surprisingly, it's been around for a while, but it's really powerful. You get to use 3D, get to see the space, and then we'll go through a little walkthrough later. So, just going to get into it and start kind of messing around with this model, making a few changes and kind of working through this and just see where it ends up. One of the bigger changes that she wanted was we need to increase the reception area a little bit, and we need to sort of reconfigure these chairs on the right so that we can get a different orientation. The front door is kind of fixed where it's at because it's part of this retail development, so that's not changing. So I'm just going to lay out where she wants the reception desk to go. She did say she wanted to lose this storage spot. So it's kind of interesting. We had a storage spot for her to put, just building storage things. But she felt it was overkill, which I kind of tend to agree because she has a really big break room color bar. So we're kind of just seeing how we might reconfigure this. Since I have to gain an extra 6 feet or so for the reception area, that 5 feet helps. And then this whole wall might end up moving up a bit. In fact, I think this break room ended up larger than it needed to be. So we're just going to kind of shift everything up a little bit. We don't need this extra table here. So I'm just going to kind of take some of these, move it up a couple feet, see how that feels. And as I do this, it can get a little messy because I just kind of move things around. There will be a moment when I have to kind of come back and fix everything, but I kind of have to do it a little loose right now just till I figure out where things are going. I'm about to move this up, but I want to make sure there is a column here that's existing. So I want to make sure that we're kind of not moving anything that's, going to actually be there. So got to make sure I deselect that. So I moved everything up. That does, it gives us quite a bit more room to have the reception here. Fit in that. So now we kind of look at it. How does it feel with this additional space as we walk in? Before, the reception desk being right here, I mean, that was like right on top of you as you walked in. So I want to just open Inkscape now and just start looking at it from a 3D perspective. That's really the power of this tool, is making sure we can get a sense of what it feels like in the space. It takes a bit to open just because Inkscape's a pretty big program, especially when you start adding stuff into it. But yeah, thanks for coming along with me. If you're watching this live, it's amazing. I never thought anybody would actually be interested in watching me work, but you never know. And if you're catching this on the replay, thanks for hanging out. All right, so it's going to start with the 3D crop view. So I'm going to switch it out to the full view because I need to see it with the roof and everything on there. This portion of the design that I do, we're already in Revit. So I've already done a lot of the sketching. We've already done some moving things around. So now it's kind of getting into the fine detail of everything. So again, this is the idea is it's in a strip center. So we've modeled enough for what we can see. You know, I don't need to model the rest of the building. But the idea is you kind of come in, you got your reception area, retail, and then your salon seats kind of moved around there. Interesting, sometimes when I move things, not everything moves. So that bottle will need to be moved. But definitely feels a lot bigger as you walk in. You're not walking in right into the bar. So then the next step is she wanted to see this layout where we have these sort of floating island chairs. She wanted to see if we can make these two, instead of facing the wall, be of similar layout. And I think that's why we gave us a little more depth in the reception area so that we can have more of this room for the chairs. So pretty simple. First, let's sort of reconfigure the reception area. And I'm just kind of moving things generally for now. And then as we look at these two seats, let's just go ahead and get rid of these for now. And then we're going to take this and just kind of duplicate it. And have a phone call from a client. So that's also the part of owning a business that you don't really hear about, is you're in the middle of design and sometimes you got to stop what you're doing to handle something else. All right, so just kind of copied that over. It's not exactly, it might not be bad. It does feel a little tight in here. If you think about it, you're going to be sitting in the chair, you'll have a hairstylist behind you. So we'll definitely need some more room there. We also don't want to get too close where it's back to back, you know, everybody bumping into each other. So we may need to kind of take this whole thing. And part of the deal with this is, you know, this is a real project. This isn't a conceptual project. At the end of the day, my client on this is she owns this salon and she needs a certain amount of chairs to make the pro forma work out. And the more chairs we can get it, the more income she has. But we also don't want to make it so that people can't really use the space and it's not really a good, comfortable place to be. So kind of have to balance that sometimes, is whether we add 2 more chairs, but we make the space a little too tight. We don't want to sacrifice these things. One of the things she really liked initially was we did these sort of arched openings so that you get a bit of connection between the chairs, but it kind of makes it a little nicer. One thing I'm concerned about now, seeing this with all these multiple stations, is that it may be overdone. You know, it's this 1 arch, 2 arch, 3 arch, 4 arch. It kind of gets to be repetitive. So that's one thing I'm going to kind of look at is that really what look she was going for, or how that feels in the space. By having this additional station, it definitely feels a little more closed off as we walk in. You're right on top of the chair now, but there's still plenty of room on this back wall. So we'll kind of look at that a little bit closer. The rest of the space feels okay. These would be just like standard chairs. We wanted the space to still feel open, but not so open that it's like everybody can see what everybody else is doing. So we offered some levels of privacy where people come in and they have maybe the chair in the corner or the chair here. But the one area that is sort of has to stay is this is shared shampoo area. So we dressed it up a little bit, kind of made this nice little arch feature that plays in with the rest of it and added some lights to it. You can see when I moved the wall for the got rid of the storage, the ceiling didn't move. So we'll just ignore that for now. So how does it feel now? I don't know. I'm not sure if I like the repetition of these arches in this wall here. We did also originally have this half wall with that same sort of arched feature. But then we changed it out to just kind of squared off glass just to be able to balance it out a little bit, to not have that same thing I was talking about earlier with like the too many arches where it's repetitive. Let me see what it looks like just without the wall together. It's a little more open, but it feels kind of weird with these two floating mirrors there. Could do, instead of arching it, could see if maybe we just flatten it out. Square it off. What does that look like? A little high. Yeah, I don't like that at all. Okay, let's go back to the arch. Maybe we'll come back to that in a little bit. I know one of the difficulties I have as a commercial architect is I do a lot of different project types, and I try to understand the needs of the clients as we do it. And I do quite a bit of salon work, but the difficulty I have is I haven't had hair in a long time, so I haven't visited a salon. But this is where, as an architect, it's, talk to the client, find their needs, visit other salons, ask them what works for them. I'm definitely no expert in salons, but that my client is. And so she gives me the idea and I kind of run with it from there. So the other thing that she wanted to see was the idea that she wanted the arches up along this back wall. And what concerns me is the same thing, is that it's going to be a bit overdone. And I really want certain arches to kind of take prominence. There's a hierarchy that we want to go with where, maybe this front one that kind of frames the view as you walk in, maybe this is the most prominent arch. And then this one that's backlit, that becomes a feature. So those should stand out a little bit more. So I'm still not sure with these curved portions. The other thing we need to think about a lot of times when I'm designing is just, obviously this is my client's first salon that she's doing on her own. And, she didn't have the biggest budget in the world. It's 2,000 square feet, and it's not cheap where we are to do sort of this higher end look. So there are certain elements that, it does cost more. Surprisingly, it's really weird, but it does cost more to add arches than to just do it square. So, there's some cost on that. If we have a glass wall like this, if I were to arch this glass wall, that would be way more expensive than just squaring it off. So I'm trying to look at it like, where do I get the biggest bang for my buck, or for my client's buck, to give the highest features without killing the budget. One of the things we also talk about too is being a salon is it can get loud, but she doesn't want the cost of adding full-on ceilings throughout the space. So we have this feature with this wood slat that kind of warms up a bit of the brightness of the space and adds a bit of texture, but it also kind of helps reduce some of the noise coming down too. So I'm wondering if maybe this sort of wood slatted feature could be an element that we have somewhere going vertically as well. Maybe the separation between these two, instead of a arch, we could put some kind of slat wall there. I'm not sure. But this is kind of how design works, is, it's definitely iterative. This is, I think, version 4 of the designs that we've done. So, version 4 is early. I've had some projects that were on version 30. They're multi-year projects, much bigger, but Sometimes, we hit the answer right away, but more often than not, it's an iteration. Like I said, when we first started this, and if you're new, just joining now, this is a salon for a client of mine. When we first started this, she actually wanted fully enclosed rental suites. So each salon has its own suite where somebody could rent out that space, have their own chair. But as soon as we started laying it out, it took up way too much room. And in fact, that might be good. Let me give me a minute. I'm going to open that file so we can just kind of see um, the iterations that we've went through. As a practicing architect, just having this conversation with a client the other day is, I work on maybe 20 to 40 projects a year, and the biggest thing is staying organized. So I am on this design version 4, but I still have version 1. Every time we make a significant enough change, we add a version number on it, because when you're practicing in the industry, oftentimes you do go through the iterations, and you end up going right back to the first one you did in the first place, which you had to go through those steps and those exercises to make sure versions 2 through 9 weren't any good, and version 1 is the one that you wanted. You just kind of have to go through that process. So yeah, while this is opening, if you all have any questions, I'm not sure who's watching, where you're from, what your experience with architecture is, if you have any desire to be an architect, or just kind of like hanging out, let me know. I'm more than happy to answer any questions about the industry, design process, me, whatever. Go ahead and type it in the chat. I'm assuming my chat's working. I don't really know. It's my first time doing a live, so we'll see. I have been having server issues today. It's a little slower than normal, but we'll get there. The good and bad part of owning your own architecture firm too is, you get to make these decisions, but also when the server's not working, generally you're the one responsible for making it work. So it's kind of fun doing live, working with everybody, kind of watching and being a part of it. And I don't know if anybody saw the video I did a while back where I designed the what we call the Fantasy Factory for the Grindhard Plumbing guys. So we actually did a live when Edwin had a live that I was on his, and we were just kind of doing the same thing, walking through the Enscape model, kind of making some decisions as we go. And sometimes it's funny. That's the most impressive part of doing this, is just being able to make a change and see it on the 3D model as we go. Yeah, so here's an early version. You can see how much the design changed from, we had back-to-back seats facing each other, just all in a row, and then 3 little private suite areas, and then a tiny break room and a couple of bathrooms. And then that progressed to having sort of them all along a line, and then clustered into a group, and then kind of pushing everything more towards the front. One of the things we had to deal with on this is it's a deep space with only glass on one side, and that's what happens in retail design. Is they're generally deeper spaces, so there's a ton of sunlight up front, and because of that, we want to put the back spaces, the areas that don't need as much light in the back of house is what we call them. Okay. So here we're just going to go through and clean up some of the things we've done. Got rid of that space so I can move that. Need to fix the ceiling on here. move these lights. This is great because I generally talk to myself while I'm designing anyway, so now I'm kind of talking to you. This area is kind of concerning me with this new pushed back sort of separator wall, is that this front wall feels a little bare. She's going to have a bit of retail, so we do have some sort of shelving that we'll need. Need some more chairs, maybe not a bench. How does that feel? Chairs better than bench? And I come to find with some of my projects, especially commercial projects, anytime there's a bench, one person sits on it and nobody else will sit on it, no matter how long it is. It feels almost like you're invading their space. I dealt with that when I did a coffee shop. They had a whole separate room that could be kind of utilized for people during the day, but the second one person goes in there with their laptop, the whole room doesn't get used, because it's almost like this societal thing where nobody wants to like go into that space that somebody else is in. So we ended up nixing that room and just opening it up, because it was wasted space essentially. And unless you're the first one in there in the morning, you're not gonna get a chance to use that space, and it just feels really uncomfortable. However, and I don't know about you guys, but wherever you are, but breweries started getting really kind of big here in Austin. So I did a ton of breweries, and almost every brewery I did, their seating layout was just like picnic table outside. And it's almost like that invited community. And it was almost like societally, we all agreed like, hey, I don't mind sitting next to somebody on a bench when it's at a brewery. But if you put that picnic table somewhere else, there's no way I'm sitting next to somebody. So it's interesting, the psychology of like seating and how people decide where they're going to sit. I have a family of 5, and so anytime we're out at a restaurant, we have to find the corner seat, the booth, or whatever, because the majority of restaurants, and this is coming as a designer of restaurants, we plan around 4 tops. That's generally how seating works. So it is kind of inconvenient for us, but it's also just part of the life that we know. The other thing too with this seating area is, from what she's telling me, her clientele, this isn't like a walk-in appointment salon. This is usually going to be appointment only type of clientele. So the people aren't going to be sitting for very long in the seats. It's mostly a staging area. Maybe the stylist is finishing up with their appointment earlier, and then their appointment comes in. They can see them. If you're sitting, you're working here, you see your client come in, you kind of wave at them and tell them it'll be just a minute. But in reality, like, they're not sitting waiting for the next stylist available. So it doesn't need to be a luxury. I've done a few like med spas and things like that, that were a little more where somebody has treatment and maybe it's a massage, and they're going to go hang out for a little bit. And so we had to make those almost like a lounge. This waiting area isn't intended to be like a lounge. It's literally just waiting for a few minutes for somebody to show up. So I think the chairs are probably better. I'm wondering too, I have sort of bookshelves on here, but her intention might actually not be bookshelves. A lot of times they'll come in with these glass shelves. Let's see if there's any pre-built bookshelves. So this is the object library from Inkscape. They call it Cosmos. This is generally what I use for most of my projects, just because I don't want to have to custom design a lot of these elements if they're already done, but sometimes they're just not the right fit. So I'll have to look for something, and if they don't quite have it, maybe they'll have something similar. Like this might be similar to what they might have. It's got cabinets down below where you can store product, and then you can display some on top. So let's bring it in and see how big that fits in the space. It's not as big as I thought it was. Let's see if we can find something else. Sometimes with Cosmos, it's sometimes hard to see scale. Like when you do plants, like if I were to pick a tree, they have a little person silhouette there, so I could see how tall the tree is. But sometimes with furniture, you just don't know. Go shelving. This one might be the right size. Not exactly the right look, but at least I can get a scale off of it. Yeah, it's probably about the right size. So let's go ahead and get rid of this one. Yeah, it fills up the space a little bit more if she's going to end up with a sort of taller vertical cabinet where product will be displayed. She also, wants to have water and coffee available to the guests. So now I'm kind of thinking, okay, if I'm a customer and I walk in and there's chairs right there and the coffee's way over there, should that be switched so I'm not walking right into a chair? Let me see what that feels like. I'm going to take these, move it up here closer to the coffee. Take this, move this back. I'll have to move the shelves too. So I'm just going to pop a quick elevation. And this is the beauty of Revit is I want to see what that wall looks like. I can just make an elevation view and then I can see what that looks like looking at it flat. And then now it populates in Inkscape. I think I want to move that shelf just a little bit. Yeah, I think that feels better. So you're not walking in and somebody's right there sitting there. The only concern is that sometimes, after you get your hair done, you're going to come and the stylist might come with you and kind of pick out a few products for you to grab. So if you're kind of standing here looking at products and somebody walks in, are you like right up on there? So how much room do we have? And this wall is already here, so I can't really move that. 4'6". Let's put a person there and see what that feels like. One thing when I'm picking people, it's amazing. This actually takes way longer than it should because I try to fit appropriate people to the space that it is. So like, for example, I'm doing a salon. I'm not going to put somebody with no hair in. Probably wouldn't put somebody in a bathing suit. And I probably way overthink this. But I just feel like, especially if this is going to go out to a client, I want them to sort of envision the space and see what it's like. And so the more it's realistic to the actual use of the space, the more they're going to be able to picture it. So I like this one because her hair's red and not like a natural red. So maybe it was dyed or something. So it almost gives me the sense of, maybe she's one of the clients from the salon. Okay, so now I got a person standing there and she's like way up on it. She would never be that close. So now how does that feel? If I walk into the door, I'm not bumping into her, but if somebody were standing next to her or behind her, that might be a bit of a crunch point. But from what my client tells me is, she doesn't have a ton of retail. They're not a big retail specific business. So I might be okay with that. Let's go with that for a bit and just see if it feels like a problem the more I walk around. Okay, so now we got guests. Guests is sitting right next to the refrigerator. So if there's waters in there and you're sitting here and you want to go grab a refrigerator or grab a water out of the refrigerator, you have to kind of bother them. So that doesn't work for me. So I'm going to want to move this maybe to the opposite side where it's more in the open. And the way this was built, there's a hole in the That'll work. So I have to move that to, and then same for the coffee, move the coffee over. So now, oh, missed on the hole. So now you walk in, maybe see some product, you look past the archway, or maybe on the right, you see your stylist. They make eye contact with you, so you know you've been seen. You don't have to go through a hallway to find them. They don't have to find you. And then you go grab your seat. You want to get a coffee, you come to the bar, grab a coffee, maybe having some chit chat, grab a water, go back and sit down. And as you're sitting, you kind of are part of the activity, but not fully immersed in it. I think that generally feels pretty good. Now, you're a stylist, you're going to be right up on the wall here. There's not much I could do about that, though. And this is interesting. This is one thing we kind of went back and forth on. I actually built a wall around this window to close it off, but should it be open? She was telling me that the glare from the sun coming through the window actually makes it difficult, so I might switch it. So the question here is, does the door open in or out, left or right? Okay, good question. So the door is going to open out towards the sidewalk, and it's going to swing this way. So that's good, because if somebody's standing there, they're not going to get hit by the door as it opens, and it opens in this direction. And one, I know that it swings out only because I also know it's already there, it is existing. But in commercial architecture, part of building code, actually, depending on if you have a small occupant load, but in general, in commercial architecture, doors always swing out in the path of egress travel. And what that means is, if there's a emergency in here and everybody has to get out, if that door swung in, it would start a log jam and people couldn't get out because the door was sort of in the way. So that's why you'll see a lot of times in commercial spaces, doors always swing out. And when there's a ton of people in there, they'll have what's called a panic hardware or a panic bar or a crash bar, to where you don't have to use a lever to open it. You can just crash right into it and it opens out. And that came from fire code. Is in the US, we have our building codes that get updated all the time. And there was a fire that happened in Chicago, great fire. And after that, building codes kind of really started addressing fire and emergencies. So as we kind of learned more about the psychology of people, we understood that in a panic, everybody's running out, so the door should swing in the direction. Now, it's the opposite in residential. Doors almost always swing in residential. And I don't know if this is true or anecdotal or whatever, but in my architectural history classes, they would always teach us that part of the reason is, if somebody's going to break in, you can barricade yourself against that door and keep the door closed so that somebody can't break in. So the door would swing in. And I also heard, again, anecdotal, this sounds to be some truth to it, but they usually also would open in with your left hand because you would have your sword in your right hand, so you can kind of poke them through the opening. I also heard stories about like staircases, spiral staircases in medieval castles, things like that, would go either counterclockwise or clockwise, depending on whether your sword was in your right hand when you're going up versus if you're going down, whether that be in the open area. I don't know much about medieval history and architecture, but sounds good. But I do know for a fact in commercial, the door is going to open out, just to make sure, for fire. We also do have a second exit here. It's another interesting thing is this door also opens out, but this is employee only. So you'll notice sometimes if you're in a restaurant in the US, I don't know where everybody's from, but in the restaurants, sometimes they'll have two exits. And that's because if there's too many people, if this exit gets clogged up with too many people, you need to be able to exit out of the second one. The reason it's not an issue in this salon is we don't have enough occupants. There's only so many people in here. The chances of it getting clogged up are not much. So this second exit is usually just going to be an employee only area. So yeah. So yeah, as you come in, and I'm not sure if I like the light with that window there, um, only because I'm not a stylist, but one, it's going to get hot coming here. And then the sun's going to come in at a certain time and probably even reflect off of this mirror, giving a lot of glare. So, this is one thing I'm going to make a note to ask my client because she knows best um, how it works in these spaces. Um, I don't know, me as an architect specifically, I'm like, I don't know necessarily everything, especially salons. And like I said, I haven't had hair in decades. Um, there's some humility there, right? I go into it knowing that I don't know these things, but I do know the person who knows the answer, and that's going to be my client. This does feel a little tight here as well. I'd imagine if you have one stylist working here, there's not enough room for two. And so this is going to be something that I have to have a larger discussion with her on is we're going to need more room here, possibly. In order to do that, we need to lose some room somewhere along this line. And that could be losing it in the break room and just kind of everything shifts up. We could lose it in the shampoo area. But one area we can't lose it is in the restrooms. These are both accessibility compliant or what we sometimes refer to as ADA compliant, but here in Texas, they have a different word for that. But either way, we're going to have to lose somewhere in here if we want to gain more room in front of the chairs. And so this is where also I can't answer this question is if we lost 2 chairs, does this pencil into her pro forma? And what that means is she's got to make this business survive. And if she's renting out each chair, does losing 2 chairs mean the business isn't going to work? Then we need to figure out where we're going to get the space for those 2 extra chairs. And I can't answer that question. I can just tell her, here's how much space we have for those chairs. This is a bit of a high ceiling space, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. I like this sort of element coming down and shortening the space, and I wonder if this should be at this height, higher, lower. It feels right to me, and that's a lot of design too, is you think there's some magic number, but sometimes it's also just it feels right. Well, I guess there is a magic number. I got my master's degree in building science and we did, acoustics and all that kind of stuff. So there probably is a way to calculate this, but I'm not going to do all that. It feels the right height to me. But then when you come over here, it opens up more. And this is where you're going to be laying down. And this is what you're looking at. I wonder if this should extend further. And then if it extends further, what if it came down vertically on the wall just to kind of connect the vertical spaces? I'm not sure how I feel about that. It's kind of trendy right now, at least in our area where you have these wood slats that kind of go vertically and horizontally. What I do like about this is there is some layering to this with multiple heights. You sort of have this height of this wall, this height of this wall, this height of this element, plus the ceiling. So it's not just one big open space. There's different levels to this, and there's a different hierarchy. So maybe that might be my answer for the arches. Is it feels repetitive to me? Maybe because they're exactly the same. Is maybe this one needs to come down. This whole wall needs to come down a little bit and make it a smaller arch. And there's only one way to know. Is to do it. So let's take this on. I'm going to make a quick elevation view looking at that. So we're going to take this wall and edit it a bit. Maybe I'll take this down and take this down. Yes. It's right up on the mirror. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but let's just see what that looks like. I don't know. I do like that it's different. It's almost feeling too skinny here. What if I did individual arches? Sort of similar to how these mirrors are shaped. Or what if we just get rid of the wall and use these kind of mirrors with the arch on it? Well, I don't know if that'll work either because I didn't like the way it looked without the wall separating them. Let me live with this for a bit. It's funny. I want to see what it looks like from the outside, and my instinct is to kind of lean back in the chair as if I'm getting further away. I do sort of like the additional layering we get as we get further, like kind of deeper into the space as well by having these sort of three. But it just, something isn't feeling right. You know, this might be that the hierarchy is a bit off because this arch, I want it to be the prominent one, but it's skinnier than these two, which almost makes it feel like these and this one being closer, these are more prominent. Yeah, that might be it. It's getting to where there's too much going on. Part of what, I don't know, what I feel is a big lesson that I had to learn as an architect, especially when I was first starting out, is what I call the editing process. Is sometimes you have so many ideas, you have to kind of learn which ones are worth putting in, and sometimes it's maybe a great idea, but it's not a fit for this project. And so this is where I'm looking at it from like an editing lens. Is I like the arches, I like the sort of psychology of what that represents, that it's a bit of a higher end space, but at the same time it's everywhere. And so how can I edit this down to sort of take away the overarching arches, having too many of those? It does feel more open without them. What if I'm going to try something that I had sitting on the side from an earlier design. Where did it go? I had this like arched wall that I had built that kind of mimics the shampoo wall. What if I have the arches just sort of implied along the wall with a tile or something that kind of, stands out a little bit? And that does also kind of tie into what I was saying earlier about bang for buck. Having this tile on the wall is a lot cheaper than adding this freestanding wall with an arch in it, because in reality during construction, like, this wall is kind of floating. It's going to be real wobbly. So there's a couple of ways you can contend with that. Is you run it all the way up to the ceiling, which we don't want to do for a look standpoint. You have these kind of cross braces tying back, which again would not look great. Or you add a steel post and that's bolted to the ground and it's super solid. That's most likely what we're going to have to detail, because this is just kind of a floating wall. The other option is to kind of tee it off or L off to where we have another wall coming this way, which kind of braces it so it's not so wobbly. But again, we kind of didn't want to go that route because we liked the floatingness of it. So anyways, we would probably end up needing to add steel in here, which is rather costly. So by having these two other features, those would also probably have to have the same thing. And now we've added cost, we've added, and by not doing that, if we didn't do that, it opens up the space more, cost less, and then we could do a feature where it's just like a nice tiled wall or something with that implied arch, and it cost way less. So I'm kind of liking this. Yeah. Next door neighbor. Hey, yeah, I recognize you. Yeah, I don't see why it wouldn't be recorded afterwards. I've never done this before, so we'll see how it goes, how YouTube works, but yeah, I don't see why not. No worries. No worries. Yeah, I hope you feel better. I have actually came down with something too. I just got back from a vacation and got sick, so hope you feel better. But yeah, I think this is the route I might want to approach with her and just kind of see what her thoughts are on it, give her the reasons why I think getting rid of these sort of walled arches is the best way to go, and how adding these little sort of revealed tiled walls on the edge with that sort of implied arch would be better. Yeah, and so the way I work too with my clients is, as I was discussing earlier, like design's an iterative thing, and you never know when the answer is going to get there. And I'm not the type of architect where I will just show her a design and be like, "This is it. This is what you take it or leave it." I try to be very collaborative. Like I said, I don't know anything about cutting hair or getting hair cut. I don't have hair, so it's definitely a collaboration that needs to happen. So what I would do is we're going to schedule a meeting. I'm going to maybe produce some renderings from this that kind of show where we are, what our thought processes are, the sort of concerns I have with spacing. Is this enough room? Is this too tight? Kind of let her look at it, and then we'll schedule a meeting, virtual meeting, where we just get on Teams, and I'll do exactly this. I'll just walk her through the space, and hopefully, there are things that happen where it's like, can you move this? Can you move that? And I'm pretty good at Revit to where I can get those things done quickly, to where I can make the change as we're in the meeting, and we walk away with a resolution by the end, and not having to like stop what we're doing and then I'll get back to you in a week with a new rendering. Like if we could do it live, like this has really changed our industry, in my opinion, is being able to render live. And this is really bothering me, is just based on the way the design was. If you can see, I built out this wall by the shampoo bar so I could have this recessed lighting come back. But then this wall went all the way to the end and the glass went behind it. And that'll be fixed in the actual construction documents and during construction. But it's bothering me right now in the rendering. So I'm going to try to fix that real quick. And it's like, these are little things that probably don't ever get noticed, but sometimes they just bug me. And I'm probably the only person that'll ever see it. I talk a lot about that when I talk with contractors or owners, and something comes up in the field and it's like, oh, this isn't ideal. This isn't exactly what we wanted. But we have to kind of question, like, are we the only people that will know that this, situation is the way it is? And is it worth spending maybe tens of thousands of dollars to maybe correct it in a way that looks better? But at the end of the day, nobody else will know what happened. Sometimes it just makes financial sense to do that, to just fix it the best we can, but not spend an ungodly amount of money to fix something that only the architect will know it's there. And that's also probably why I get a lot of repeat work, a lot of clients that come back to me, because I feel like I'm pretty easy to work with. And it's one of the things, and I know, I believe next door neighbor, I think you said you were studying or, in school for architecture. It's, one thing that we sort of deal with in our industry is the perception, right? Is most architects are perceived as, it's our design or nothing at all. Like we don't have a great perception in a lot of views that we're easy to work with. And so, that's one thing that I try to do, and I've been trying to do for the last 24 years I've been doing this, is kind of beat that perception that we can be easy to work with, and we're not idealist that will only design things if they make us happy. At the end of the day, we can only do this if we have clients. We can only do this if the clients are paying us. And they're the ones footing the bill. They're the ones that are going to have to pay for any of these changes that we make. And so I try to be cognizant of that, and that we don't, we have to be good stewards of our clients. Sorry, I'm kind of talking and thinking at the same time. So I just cleaning this up because this, like I said, this wall is just something I had kind of set aside earlier and doesn't quite work with the current layout. So I'm just kind of faking it for now. Just so it doesn't go into that. If I have to move it down. Put that to the center. Try to center that up with the floating island there. So I don't know, how does that feel? And I'm not sure about the tile selection. Black kind of glossy tile isn't necessarily what she was going for. We also have this white tile here, so I may end up, kind of swapping this to match that. But I do sort of like the contrast that this is different than this area. This tells you it's a bit of a unique area. So let's clean this up. So we're gonna, and this is one thing that does take a lot of time, but I think is worth it, is there are some things where I will custom build it. So this, and I have no idea if any of you guys know how to use Revit or not. But Revit, you could just build a wall, you can just, add tile to it or whatever. For this particular thing, that I just did this as a generic model, a model in place, because I was kind of specific on what I wanted it to look like. So I had to model the wall and the tile and everything, as opposed to just drawing a wall. And like I said, I've been using Revit for, gosh, I don't even know. I started actually teaching Revit in 2012, I think, something like that. So a lot of this is, also, it's quicker for me sometimes to model it because I have a lot of experience with this. If you had me do this in SketchUp, it would take me forever. Or if I had to do it in, I actually got started in AutoCAD, which is like the 2D line drawing. If I had to do this in AutoCAD, it would take forever. And that's one of the rules we have in our office too, is, I have a lot of employees and interns and stuff that come straight out of school, and maybe they're really good at one program or whatever. Because we're production in Revit specifically, I always say, like, if your design tool that you're good at is something else, that's fine, but it just has to make it into Revit eventually. And what I mean by that is, I've had employees that were really good at 3D Studio Max and they could only think properly if it was in 3D Studio Max. And so for the early design stuff, as we're making renderings, things like that, do it in 3D Studio Max. I really don't care. But when it gets to the point where everybody in our office has to work on it, then it has to come into Revit so that we can actually work on it together in the same program that everybody knows. So if you need advice on, what program to learn, if you're, starting architect or, you're in school, learn what you need to learn, whatever feels the most comfortable for you for a design standpoint. But I highly, highly recommend learning Revit as soon as possible. Most architecture firms that I know work in Revit professionally. There are some where it's like, maybe the architect's a little bit older and they just haven't caught on yet. And SketchUp is a quick to pick up program. It's, it takes a long time to master, but it's a quick to pick up program. So a lot of times people go with SketchUp. And when I was in school, granted, this was early 2000s, most software didn't exist, but we were using Rhino. I don't even know if that's really used that much anymore. A couple of my employees, they do know Rhino. Maya was really big. This was also early 2000s, mid 2000s, when generative components were being a thing where you were using like algorithms. Nowadays, it may be totally different. But yeah, you could see, it gets the idea across pretty quickly. I was able to model this wall and say, we're going to have painted gypboard on here. We're going to have maybe a tile wall back here. And what I actually did, just kind of, it may not make it to the final cut of the construction documents, is I actually held the, can't really see because the chair's in the way. I held the drywall out. So the tile is actually recessed a bit from the drywall just to give it more depth, as opposed to just taking the tile and putting it right on the drywall. I actually did the opposite. I put the drywall out, cut it out, and then put the tile inset in there. So it gives a little bit of that layer and depth there. It's like a little detail that kind of makes us feel a little more high end than just we slap some tile on the wall. So big goal today was, okay, reconfigure the reception area to give them more room. So when you walk in, there's not somebody sitting right next to you and you have a little bit of depth. See if we can fit 2 more chairs on this island layout as opposed to against the wall. And the space is made up by losing the storage area and office area and some of this break room a bit. We did lose some lockers in here. Graphic designer, SketchUp, Revit looks way faster. Yeah, SketchUp I think is really easy to work with and easy to learn because it's pretty intuitive, right? It's a push and pull kind of thing. You're going to make a box and push this piece, pull that piece. And so for a lot of sort of graphic or, architects, designer type of people, it's easy to conceptualize, especially like architecture school. We learn with models and things like that. So the idea of pushing and pulling, Revit's not like that because it's a building information model. It's I want to put a wall in, but I have to tell it, what is this wall made of? And especially when you're first starting out, you may not know what a wall is made of. So like here, we say it's 3 5/8 metal stud, 5/8 inch chipboard on this side, 5/8 inch chipboard on that side. It makes a 4 7/8 inch thick wall. And we're going to build that wall up to, top of parapet, 4 feet down, 20'6". So it's like you're typing in all these parameters, and that's hard to design with that real loosely. So from a professional standpoint, a lot of times, like I have constraints anyways. I don't have like free reign to do anything. So I like to use Revit because I'm not doing a Sydney Opera House where I'm just having these swooping forms. I can get to space planning quickly. I can put this office in here and then I can click on it and it'll tell me that office is 109 square feet, right? Maybe you can do that in SketchUp, I don't know, but can't easily do that. And the great thing with Revit for us is I'm a systems person, to where when we first start a project, all the views, all the sheets are already sort of created. So we can actually get from this early design all the way into full construction documents that could be built. We have to, like, for example, I'm hiding all this stuff because you guys don't need to see all of it, but this pink stuff I'm just turning it off. But like this door number, we just click on the door and it has all the information for the door, which we can then go into a door schedule when it automatically sort of populates that schedule. And we could say this door is 3 feet wide, 7 feet tall, and get all the information. So it's real data driven. We can set up this wall, and every time I click on it, we know it's this type of wall. So from a construction document standpoint, it's much better and faster to get in production. But a lot of people fumble with it during the design charrette. It looks really easy, but I guarantee you, like, it takes a lot of time to learn it. Because I know I have employees that, they fresh out of school, and it takes them a little bit to kind of get caught up to it. But once you get good at it, it could be super powerful. Because like I said, I'll have design meetings with my client and do just what I'm doing here. I've been live for an hour, and, look at the changes we made that we can actually see. And the great thing is that if, let's say, my client is like, this is great, this is exactly what I want, we're good to go, I go back into Revit, it's already done. I just might need to, move some things around and fix it. But for the most part, this floor plan is correct. What we call the reflected ceiling plan, which is like if you're looking up at the ceiling, that matches. So any change I make here, and I'll just show you, let's just say, where's a good wall? Let's say if I get rid of this wall right here, I delete it from the floor plan, it deletes it from the reflected ceiling plan. So it's all kind of automated. So it's a really powerful tool. Now, with that being said, it's powerful, but it's also not cheap. And there's a reason why it's expensive because, like I said, it's super useful. I think students can get these for free while they're a student. But I think once you get in a professional world, I don't know how it like determines when you get it for free or what. But in my office, we pay, it's like $350 per month per seat. So per user, just for for Autodesk, for Revit. And then with this Inkscape add-on, I can't even remember, it's a couple $100 for that as well. So, you're talking $500-$600 plus the computer to run it. Everything we have here, we do custom built PCs just to get the video cards. And I don't know if you guys build PCs, but video cards aren't cheap nowadays. Yeah, it's a super expensive software to run, but from a professional standpoint, totally worth it. Absolutely worth it. I used to start, when I first started out, we didn't have computers, obviously. This was early 2000s, and everything was done by hand. So I do also say this is super powerful and I love it, but there is still something about hand sketching. I said earlier when we first started, this is sort of, the phase that we're at, that we've already 3D modeled it. But this started with sketches, just like everything else. Grabbing some trace paper and getting your ideas out quickly, I think, is almost a lost art nowadays. They don't do a lot of that in schools, at least from what I'm seeing from my employees that come in fresh out of school. And there's something to be said about just holding a piece of paper, holding a pencil in your hand, and being able to get your idea on paper quickly. And I think what's happening is a lot of times people are sort of nervous or afraid, like they want the sketch to be perfect. But that's not what sketching is about, in my opinion. Sketching is just to get ideas out. Sketching is just to sort of, think through things in a physical manner. So this all started from sketching, and then I bring it into Revit. And here, like in our office, though, we are pretty quickly into Revit because I do almost all the designs here, and because I'm pretty quick at Revit, and I've been doing it long enough to. A lot of times I may skip sketching just because I know already exactly how big the space is and what can fit, and I'll just go straight into Revit. But sometimes I'll get stuck, and I'll have to go I'll print it, and then like here's some sketches of just working with a client yesterday on, probably can't see that, just like laying out different restroom layouts, things like that. And that's also super useful, is just to sit in front of a client, because maybe you're out in the field and you don't have a computer in front of you. You can't pull up Revit, but I can pull out my sketchbook and come up with an idea out in the field. So I think we're at a good point I can, kind of create some of these renderings, update the floor plan a bit, make my notes, and then shoot this over to my client and then schedule a meeting to follow it up. Just again, quick little design session. I knew I was going to be working on it, so I thought I'd go live. Appreciate everybody who's been here. If you guys have any other questions, I'll hang out for a few more minutes, and then I got to get to a little more production. But yeah, thanks for hanging out with me when I do this. I don't know how often I'm going to do this. It kind of depends on schedule, because like I said, I have to run this firm. But I don't know, every couple of weeks, once a week would be awesome. But it probably would be Tuesday afternoons. So if you guys are kind of free during this time, more than happy to have you hang out with me. I do have a video coming out on Thursday, as usual. This one, it was about ADUs. I don't know if you guys know what ADUs are, but also like, how do we make a smallest ADU? Because I have another ADU video, but it was like a bigger house. So I was like, how do I make it smaller? And that actually came from a client of mine. So that one should be interesting. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for coming along, guys. So with that, I'm going to end the live, and maybe we'll see each other again. Thanks for coming, everybody.